The courtroom air was thick with dust and judgment. At 24, I stood before a judge, feeling the collective gaze of strangers branding me an ungrateful freeloader. My aunt, Linda, had just presented her case, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. Your Honor, Sophia owes me $30,000, she declared, waving a sheet of paper like a righteous banner. For all the years I sacrificed, raising her when her own parents couldn't be bothered. The phrase couldn't be bothered was a fresh twist of the knife. My parents hadn't abandoned me. They died in a rain-slicked car accident when I was 12. Linda had stepped in, and for over a decade, she'd narrated our story as one of her noble sacrifice and my endless debt. What she didn't know, as she stood there savoring her performance, was that I had spent months preparing for this exact moment. She thought she was calling in alone. I was about to foreclose on her entire narrative. The lawsuit papers had arrived like a declaration of war, 3 days after I declined to fund her kitchen renovation. The itemized bill was a masterpiece of audacity. $500 monthly for room and board from ages 12 to 18, $8,000 for emotional labor compensation, and $6,000 in interest. The total demand was $50,000, but the attached note, circulated to our entire family, was the real weapon. Please talk sense into Sophia about honoring family debts before this destroys our family. My phone became a siege engine of guilt. Relatives I barely heard from were suddenly experts on my moral failings. The most devastating revelation wasn't the dollar amount. It was her repeated claim that I'd been living rent-free in her house. The house. The cozy, two-story colonial with the lilac bush my mother planted. The house I'd believed was Linda's generous provision, but which in the fog of my grief-stricken childhood, I'd never questioned. A deep, unsettling suspicion took root. Her campaign of humiliation was relentless. At my cousin's wedding, she seated me at the children's table. Given her financial immaturity, she'd sigh loudly to anyone listening. During the speeches, she took the mic to toast those who understand gratitude, her eyes pinning me across the room. I fled to a bathroom stall, my cheeks wet with tears of rage and powerlessness. That night, I made a decision. If this was war, I would arm myself. I began documenting everything. A small digital recorder became my constant companion. I captured her casual barbs at family dinners, her not-so-subtle reminders of my lifetime debt. But the true turning point came during a forced march of gratitude, helping her clean the basement for a family reunion. Buried behind mildewed boxes of ornaments, I found a dusty manila envelope with my name typed on the tab. My hands trembled as I pulled out the documents inside. They were my parents' last will and testament and the accompanying trust paperwork. The words on the page reshaped my world. The house was not Linda's. It had been left to me, held in trust until I turned 25. Furthermore, the trust was to pay Linda a monthly stipend, a generous one for my care and upkeep. She was never to charge me rent. The house was always meant to be my home. Then my eyes snagged on a series of bank statements. Line after line for over a decade showed a monthly deduction labeled Trust Management Fee, $200. A fee nowhere authorized in the trust documents, a fee that flowed directly into Linda's personal account. The cold calculation of it stole my breath. While she'd been shaming me for eating her food, she'd been quietly pilfering from my inheritance to the tune of nearly $30,000. I took photos of every page with my phone, the flash illuminating the dust in the gloomy basement. The grief that washed over me wasn't for my parents this time, but for the childhood stolen by a woman who saw tragedy as an investment opportunity. I took my evidence to Mr. Rodriguez, my parents' original estate lawyer, now gray and retired. He reviewed the papers, his face hardening with each page. "Sophia," he said, his voice low with anger, "this isn't just a civil matter. This is theft. We're going to file a counterclaim." Emboldened by my silence, Linda's threats grew louder. "You have 2 weeks to wire the money, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." At a family dinner, from my hiding spot in the kitchen, I heard her boast to my Aunt Carol. She thinks she's so smart with her little design business. She's about to learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. What if she fights it? Aunt Carol asked. With what? Linda laughed, a brittle, confident sound. I've got receipts, I've got witnesses, and I've got 12 years of raising an ungrateful brat. The day of the hearing dawned, ironically, the day after my birthday, a timing she'd chosen, she told the family, to teach me about adult responsibilities. In the stark fluorescent light of the courtroom, Linda presented her handwritten invoices with theatrical solemnity. Her lawyer painted a picture of a saintly aunt and a parasitic niece. My client provided housing, food, and guidance through difficult years with no compensation. Miss Mitchell has lived rent-free for 12 years and refuses to acknowledge this debt. When it was my turn, I stood, my knees weak but my resolve forged in steel. Your Honor, my aunt is not only seeking payment for services she was already compensated for, but she has been systematically stealing from my inheritance for over a decade. I approached the bench and handed the clerk my evidence, the clean copies of the will, the trust documents, the annotated bank statements. The judge, a weary-looking man with sharp eyes, began to read. The rustle of paper was the only sound. Her lawyer tried to interrupt. Your Honor, we were unaware of these documents. Furthermore, I continued, holding up my phone, I have audio evidence proving my aunt knowingly concealed these documents to maintain control and continue collecting unauthorized funds. With the judge's permission, I played the clip. Linda's voice, clear and contemptuous, filled the room. Those papers are buried so deep she'll never find them. She thinks she owns that house. She's lucky I didn't throw her out years ago. The color drained from Linda's face, leaving two stark spots of rouge. Her performance of wounded benefactor crumbled into sheer panic. The judge looked from the documents to Linda, his expression turning to granite. Miss Thompson, he said, cutting off her sputtering lawyer, these trust documents are explicit. You were receiving a monthly stipend for Sophia's care. The house was and is an asset of her trust. These management fees you instituted are unauthorized. This isn't a debt collection case. It appears to be a case of fiduciary fraud and embezzlement. Linda jolted to her feet. But, Your Honor, I raised her. I sacrificed everything. What you did, the judge replied coldly, was betray your fiduciary duty and steal from a child who had lost her parents. The claim against Miss Mitchell is dismissed with prejudice. Based on this evidence, I am ordering you to repay all unauthorized funds withdrawn from the trust, with interest, within 30 days. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation. The gavel fell with a final echoing crack. The silence in the gallery behind me was profound. The family members who'd come to witness my comeuppance were now staring at Linda with dawning horror and revulsion. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding sun, the weight of 12 years of guilt and obligation lifted. The legal victory was staggering. The house was indisputably mine, and Linda was ordered to repay over $40,000. But the real victory was the truth. The family's silence, once a weapon used to isolate me, now belonged to them as they grappled with the monster in their midst. Overnight, Linda's reputation evaporated. Stories resurfaced, her odd curiosity of the estate after the funeral, her insistence on handling all the complicated finances for a grieving child. The narrative of Saint Linda was rewritten as the story of a grifter. I returned to the house, my house, and for the first time, I felt not like a burdensome guest, but like a daughter coming home. I had fought for it, not with dramatics, but with documents, with truth, and with the quiet strength of the girl who had learned to pay attention. Her silence no longer hurt me. It was the sound of my freedom.